So there's this girl, Emily Pike. She was 14. She was from the San Carlos Apache Reservation in Arizona, a tribal community out in the desert, pretty remote, where everyone's connected to everyone. Back in 2023, something really bad happened to her. She was sexually assaulted by a relative, and afterward, she tried to take her own life. Because of that, social services made the call to move her out of her home and into a group home, but not just any group home. They sent her all the way to Mesa, Arizona, like 100 miles away from her family, her tribe, everything she knew. The place was run by a company called Sacred Journey, just a regular-looking building on a regular street corner. But for Emily, who grew up in a tight-knit community, it must have felt like being dropped on another planet. No family, no culture she recognized, just rules and shift workers. People who knew her say she was a normal kid in a lot of ways. Liked pink stuff, liked shopping, liked drawing, had a cat. She was also the big sister to her younger siblings. So she was kind of stuck in that in-between spot, old enough to feel responsible for people, young enough to still need someone looking out for her. Then in late January 2025, she disappeared. Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, let me know your country in the comments. I love seeing where these cases reach. And if you're interested in real criminal cases, unsolved mysteries, and in-depth investigations, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you don't miss future documentaries. On January 27th, someone from the group home called the police, not even 911, just the regular non-emergency line, and said a kid had gone AWOL. The call sounds almost casual when you listen to it. And here's the messed up part. Even the basic info they gave police was wrong. Wrong age. Misspelled her name. A great. Small stuff, but it makes you wonder how closely anyone was actually watching her. What we do know for sure is she left through her bedroom window, so nobody snatched her out of a locked building she chose to leave. The home later described itself as a non-secure voluntary placement, basically meaning a 4-year-old could just walk out whenever she wanted. Whether that was an okay setup for a kid with her history is a huge part of the controversy now. Turns out, the home was also supposed to immediately call Arizona's child safety hotline the second a kid's whereabouts were unknown, even for a runaway. They didn't do that either. The state caught that mistake later and told them to fix their policies. By then, it was way too late to matter. 2.5 weeks later, on the 14th of February, 2025, Valentine's Day, her remains were found, not in Mesa, almost 100 miles away, out in the Tonto National Forest near Globe, back near the area she'd originally been taken from. She was found along a highway, in trash bags, dismembered. Ruled a homicide. That distance is the thing that messes with you. Someone moved her, or her body, basically back toward where she came from. Was that on purpose? Did whoever did this know that stretch of highway? Or was it random, just an empty spot off the road? Nobody knows. Weirdly, another body had turned up near that same stretch of highway back in 2021. A guy who'd been shot. Could be nothing, could be something. Because she was a tribal member, and this happened near reservation land, the case ended up involving like 5 different agencies. Mesa Police, the county sheriff, the FBI, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Which sounds like a lot of help, but in practice, it just means a lot of organizations passing pieces of the case back and forth. Her death actually became a big deal publicly. People held vigils. There was a funeral at her old high school back on the reservation. A memorial popped up at the intersection where she was last seen when it got taken down. People just rebuilt it. The FBI director even came out and personally met with her family in May 2025. But here's where it stands. More than a year later, nobody's been arrested. No suspect has ever been named. Cops have said they talked to a person of interest and did some search warrants, but that didn't go anywhere public. There's a reward now up to $200,000 between the FBI and the tribe. Nobody's claimed it. Her mom has said 3 people were questioned early on. Nothing came of it. And a lot of the actual case file autopsy details, evidence, all of it is sealed. So even people following this closely don't actually know what happened to her in the days between leaving that window and being found on that highway. Honestly, the whole thing isn't just who killed her. It's also a story about a kid who needed help in about 5 different ways. And every single system that was supposed to catch her, the tribe, the state, the group home, the police, missed her at some point. Nobody talked to each other fast enough or carefully enough. So that's where it sits. We know where she was last seen. We know where they found her. Everything in between is still just dark. So here's something kind of wild that comes out once you look at the lawsuit. The guy who's actually named as the plaintiff suing the group home, that's Jensen Pike, Emily's dad. And get this, he's in prison, has been, the whole time. So you've got a dad, locked up, who couldn't even raise his own daughter, now legally the one fighting for accountability over what happened to her after she was taken away from him. And the group home's lawyers went right at that. In their response, they basically said both parents, Jensen and Emily's mom, Stephanie, were unfit, unresponsive, and neglectful, which is obviously a strategic move, right? They're trying to shift blame off themselves and onto the parents, since it was the parent situation that got Emily taken into tribal custody in the first place. Nobody's proven that claim true or false, yet it's just sitting there in legal paperwork. But it shows you how fast this whole thing turned into everybody pointing fingers at everybody else. The actual lawsuit itself, filed by a law firm called Phillips Law Group, says the group home was negligent. Basically, they didn't watch her, didn't supervise her, didn't protect her like they were supposed to, and that's what led to her death. Later, they added more to it, saying the home hired bad staff, inexperienced, reckless people, and that the company should have known better. One of the lawyers, Olivia Lemorocco, made a comment that stuck with me. She said a lot of these group homes are run like a business instead of actually being about the kids. And she asked the obvious question, if Emily had gotten real attention, real counseling, given that everyone knew she'd had suicidal thoughts, would any of this have happened? But she was honest about it too. She said straight up, "We don't know." Which, in a story full of people pointing fingers, was kind of refreshing. Someone actually admitting they can't be sure. So then the group home fires back. Their defense is basically, hey, it wasn't us who decided she could be in a low-security place. It was the tribe's own social services, the tribal court, and the people who evaluated her. They're the ones who agreed she could go into a non-secure, voluntary home. And here's a detail that hadn't come out before. Apparently, Emily had spent the whole previous year in a lockdown treatment facility called Oasis. And it was the staff at Oasis who decided she was ready to be discharged into a regular, non-locked group home. So the home's whole argument is, by the time she got to us, professionals had already cleared her for less restriction. We didn't make that call. And they keep repeating this, she left on her own. Nobody forced her out. And this gets into something that's genuinely hard to untangle. And it has nothing to do with who killed her. It's just about how you're supposed to handle a traumatized teenager at all. If you lock her up too tight, you're basically punishing a victim like she's the dangerous one. If you give her too much freedom, you get exactly what happened here. A 14-year-old climbing out a window at night with nowhere to go and nobody noticing fast enough. The people at Oasis made a call that she could handle less restriction. Was that the right call? Honestly, nobody outside the case can say, because all those medical and psychological records are sealed. We just don't have the full picture of what they actually based that decision on. Here's the part that really stands out to me, though. There's a TV station, ABC 15, that's been digging into Arizona's child welfare system. They've got a whole series on it called DCS, State of Failure, and they found a letter showing that when Emily first went missing, nobody ever called the state's child safety hotline. Not Mesa police, not the group home, Nobody made that call. The state had to write a letter afterward telling the home, hey, you need to call this hotline regardless of who originally placed the kid with you, which tells you there was just confusion. Nobody was clear on whose job it was. And Lemorocco's reaction to this was basically, if this one basic step got skipped, what else got skipped? Was anyone actually there for her when she was upset and asking for help? Did anyone meet her basic emotional needs in those final weeks? So really, there are two completely separate questions running through this whole thing, and it's worth keeping them apart in your head. One is, did the systems around Emily fail her? And who's legally responsible for that? That one's got actual names attached: the group home, the state agency, the way the tribe handled her placement, and it's slowly playing out in a courtroom in Maricopa County. The other question is way darker, and nobody has an answer. Who actually took her somewhere after she climbed out that window? And who's responsible for what happened to her body being found dismembered out near that highway? On that second question, there's still no suspect, no real story of what happened in between just 2 points on a map, last seen near that Mesa intersection in late January. Found about 20 miles outside Globe on February 14th. Whatever happened in the days between those 2 points is still a total blank to the public. After her body was found, they put together a task force, county sheriff's office, tribal police, the FBI, Bureau of Indian Affairs, all working it together. They set up a tip line, an online portal, all of that. The reward eventually climbed to $200,000 total. And here's the thing her uncle said early on that still holds up over a year later. There are only two things anyone actually knows for sure: where she was last seen and where they found her. Everything in the middle is still empty. And it's worth saying, this isn't just Emily's story in isolation. There's a much bigger, much older pattern here. Native American and Alaska Native women and girls go missing and get killed at rates way higher than the general population. People call it the MMIP crisis, missing and murdered Indigenous persons. And for decades, these cases have gotten way less media coverage and way slower police response than similar cases involving non-native victims. Part of that comes down to how messy the jurisdiction is. Tribal police, county sheriffs, state agencies, federal investigators, all with a piece of authority, none of them with the whole picture. Which, honestly, sounds exactly like what happened with Emily. Emily's story doesn't stand alone either. About 8 months after her body was found, in October 2025, another case popped up that felt eerily similar. A 16-year-old girl named Chalistia Colele went missing. She was White Mountain Apache from the Fort Apache Reservation, which is right next door to San Carlos, just split apart by this big canyon along the Salt River. She went missing October 16th, wasn't reported missing until 11 days later on the 27th, and then her body was found just 5 days after that, on November 3rd, on tribal land. Her family said she was the youngest in the family, loved being outdoors, loved making art. Now, nobody's officially linked these two cases. There's no proof they're connected, no shared suspect, nothing confirmed. But you've got two Apache teenage girls from neighboring reservations, both dead within about 9 months of each other. And for a lot of advocates, that's not a coincidence you can just shrug off. It feels like part of a pattern that nothing in the system has managed to stop. That pattern is part of why Arizona passed a new law, House Bill 2281. It set up an alert system for missing people who are believed to be in danger, kind of like an Amber Alert, but built specifically to cover gaps that affect vulnerable people, including Native people, who often don't get that kind of urgent public attention when they go missing. People started calling it the Turquoise Alert, and it exists pretty directly because of the pressure that built up after Emily died. But here's the hard part. That law only helps people going missing in the future. It can't go back and help Emily. So, for her family, watching this law take shape is bittersweet. Good that it might save someone else. Doesn't change the fact that it came too late for her. By the time the one-year mark hit the 14th of February, 2026, the whole thing had settled into this strange dual feeling, half memorial, half open wound. People went back to where she was last seen in Mesa, and out to the spot on Highway 60 where she was found, which now has that bloody handprint symbol painted there that's become kind of the national symbol for missing and murdered Indigenous people. They're putting in a real memorial too, a bench and a tree at a park in Mesa. Small thing, but it means that intersection isn't just a random crossroad anymore. But alongside the memorials, the frustration kept building. Her family kept saying, this isn't just normal grief over an unsolved case. It's watching the attention actually fade in real time. The FBI director visited them back in May 2025, which felt like a big deal at the time. But by 2026, federal attention had drifted toward other cases, like the search for an 84-year-old woman missing in Tucson. Nobody's saying investigators did anything wrong, they only have so many resources, and they have to split attention across a lot of cases, but it still hurts to watch. One relative, Christopher Dosella, said it straight. It's upsetting, it's sad, and it's a daily struggle watching this turn into what people are now just calling a cold case. And that's basically where it sits in 2026. The sheriff's office keeps saying the same thing every time a reporter asks, no suspect, nothing new to share. They did interview someone, executed some search warrants back in summer 2025, but none of that led anywhere public. And the full autopsy report, all the real evidence, still sealed. So even now, the public still doesn't know the actual details of what was done to her. What's left is just the shape of who she was and the shape of everything that failed her. A girl who liked pink and sparkly stuff, who drew, who shopped, who loved her cat, who survived something no kid should survive and who got sent, in the name of protecting her, straight into a maze of evaluations and licensing rules and overlapping agencies that, whatever the intentions were, didn't keep her alive. The lawsuit might eventually pin down who's responsible for the failures in her care. The task force might eventually make an arrest. But neither of those things changes the core fact that just sits there, unresolved, somewhere between a bedroom window in Mesa and a highway shoulder out in the forest. A 4-year-old girl was killed. And over a year later, nobody knows who did it. So up until this point, this story had mostly been local Arizona news and tribal advocacy groups talking about it. But it became something bigger on the 13th of May 2025 when Governor Katie Hobbs signed a bill into law, House Bill 2281. People immediately started calling it Emily's Law, which is kind of a heavy thing when you think about it now. Anytime someone sees this law mentioned in a news alert or a government document years from now, they're going to see her name attached to it. The law created something called the Turquoise Alert System. It works kind of like an Amber Alert, but it's meant specifically for missing person cases involving Indigenous people. For one of these alerts to actually go out, a couple things have to be true. The disappearance has to look unexplained or suspicious. And here's the key part. It can't be a case where the only reason for concern is, well, they're a runaway. That part is basically a direct response to what happened with Emily. Because a kid climbing out a window got treated like a routine runaway case, and that may have slowed everything down. This law is saying no, don't just write it off that easily. Now, once people started digging deeper into the timeline, more specific details came out. Emily was last seen leaving the group home around 7:45 at night on the 27th of January, 2025, wearing a pink and gray shirt. There were security cameras nearby that did catch her on video after she left, but police have never said where those cameras were or what the footage actually shows. Did she go somewhere specific? Was she alone? Nobody knows, because that footage has never been made public, which is honestly one of the more frustrating parts of this whole case. They clearly have something, some kind of visual record. They're just not sharing it. Maybe because it'd compromise the investigation. Maybe it doesn't even show anything useful. We just don't know. Here's something even more upsetting though. Emily's mom, Stephanie, wasn't told her daughter was missing until a full week later. A week. Her own case manager finally called to say, "Hey, we can't find her." 7 days is a long time for the one person who probably knew Emily best, who she might run to, what might be going through her head, to have no idea anything was even wrong. And this actually connects to something that happened way earlier. Back in September 2023, not long after Emily was first placed in the system. She and another kid went missing for a bit and got found just hanging out at a park, Kleinman Park, because they basically didn't want to be where they were supposed to be. Totally harmless, in hindsight. Just 2 kids, sneaking off for a few hours. But that earlier episode might explain why, 16 months later, people treated her real disappearance the same way, like, "Oh, she's probably just doing this again. She'll turn up." That kind of thinking might be exactly why the first police report had wrong details in it, and why it took a week to call her mom. Not because anyone meant her harm. Just because the system assumed history would repeat itself. And that's the tricky thing about cases like this. Caseworkers are juggling tons of files at once, so they build little shortcuts in their heads. A kid who's run off before and come back safe gets treated as lower priority than a brand new disappearance. Makes sense on average, but it's dangerous the one time the situation has actually changed. Did something change for Emily in those 16 months? Did she run into someone dangerous in her final weeks, instead of just looking for a few hours of freedom like before? Nobody outside the investigation knows, because those files are sealed. What we do know from her mom is that Emily wasn't someone spiraling out of control. She was actually pretty hopeful. She liked art, she was thinking about going to college, she had real plans for her future. That detail matters, because it pushes back against this lazy assumption people sometimes make about kids who run from group homes like they're troubled and basically brought the danger on themselves. Her family has consistently said, no, she went through real pain, real trauma, but she still had her eyes on the future. Her uncle described her as someone looking forward, not someone falling apart. That gap between a system that may have written her off as a low-risk repeat runaway and a family insisting she needed urgent attention never got resolved before the worst happened. On the 14th of February, 2025, Valentine's Day, her remains were found out along Highway 60, dismembered, in trash bags, out in the forest, near Globe. It was officially ruled a homicide, but the actual details, what the dismemberment looked like, how she died, what evidence they found, none of that has ever been released. It's all sealed by the county attorney's office. Which means even now, the public, and honestly, even her own family, doesn't have the kind of detailed picture that usually leaks out over time in big cases like this. The file's basically locked, even while the case itself stays wide open. More than a year later, as of right now, basically nothing's changed. No suspect named, no arrest. The task force is technically still active, but you know how these things go, there's a big push right after it happens, and then slowly, quietly, attention drains away as resources get pulled toward newer cases. Emily's family has felt that directly. The FBI director personally visited them back in 2025. By 2026, federal attention had moved on to other searches happening around the state. But here's the thing, even as the investigation itself has slowed down, Emily's name hasn't disappeared. It's actually grown into something bigger than just her case. She's a law now. She's part of a movement. People bring her up in classrooms, at the state capitol, in conversations about fixing group home oversight in general. That turquoise alert system will keep running for years, maybe decades, long after most people have forgotten the specific details of what happened to her, potentially helping find other missing people in the future. So in a strange way, her death led to something her family never wanted and would never have chosen. Not justice for her, not the arrest they're still hoping for, but a real, lasting change built to stop this from happening, unnoticed, to someone else. There's this memorial that's grown up near where she was found, and honestly, it kind of sums up the whole situation. Out along the highway heading into Globe, near this little community called Peridot, under a peak people call Mount Triplet, there's a roadside tribute that's built up over the past year. A painted portrait of Emily, lit up with turquoise light at night. Teddy bears clipped onto a chain-link fence. Flowers that people keep bringing, even now, more than a year later, driving all the way out to this remote stretch of road just to be there. When reporters went back to check on it around the 1-year mark, they noticed something kind of heartbreaking. The desert is slowly taking it back. The teddy bear's fur has gone stiff from sun and dust. The flowers that used to be bright are fading and getting brittle. Even the mural itself is starting to lose its color out there in the open. It's just what happens to anything left outside long enough. The sun and wind wear it down, and there's something quietly devastating about that image. People keep coming back to fix it, replace what's faded, and the desert just keeps wearing it down again. Like a tug of war between a community that refuses to forget and weather that doesn't care either way. There are billboards along that same highway now too, advertising the reward. It's grown to $200,000 total. Anyone driving toward Globe on Highway 60 sees it. That's a big number, and it tells you how much investigators and tribal leaders are hoping someone out there knows something and just hasn't said it yet. Nobody knows what that piece of information might actually be, or if it even exists. But the offer's out there, sitting along that highway, basically saying, if you know something, here's your chance. Emily's uncle, Allred Pike Jr., has been one of the main people speaking for the family this whole time. And the way he talks about her doesn't try to make her into either a tragic symbol or some perfect, idealized version of a person. He just describes her as she actually was. She went through a lot, he said, but she still looked toward the future, wanted to go to college, loved art, took care of her younger siblings, and even cared about her parents, despite everything that had happened with them. What he keeps coming back to, interview after interview, is that he wants people to remember her as smart and intelligent, not just a name attached to a law or a hashtag or an unsolved case file, but an actual person. He says that even without an arrest, her death has already made some kind of positive impact through the law named after her and through all the extra scrutiny now on a child welfare system that, in her case, failed pretty much every chance it had to step in. And that's really where the facts run out. More than 16 months after her body was found, this is the edge of what's actually known. Anything past this is just guessing theories about who did it, things no police report or court filing has ever confirmed. And I'm not going to do that here, because that's the part where true crime stuff usually gets it wrong, making up a neat story instead of just admitting sometimes the truth hasn't come out yet, no matter how much pressure or reward money is out there. The lawsuit against the group home is still working its way through the courts in Maricopa County. It might eventually settle the question of who was negligent in how she was cared for, but it can never tell us who actually killed her. That law named after her, the Turquoise Alert, is just permanently part of Arizona now, quietly running in the background of a state that still hasn't given her family the one thing they've wanted since day one: a name, an arrest, an answer. And that memorial out near Globe just keeps going. People replacing what the desert wears down, refusing to let her be forgotten, even while the case itself risks turning into exactly the kind of cold, quiet thing nobody wants it to become. Up next are 2 more real cases waiting for you. If this investigation captured your attention, tap 1 and keep watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for future documentaries. And before you go, tell me your city in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where viewers are watching from.